Welcome to the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania's Masonic Speaker Series. My name is Daniel Rivers, and I'll be your speaker for the third segment. The topic that I chose was the Masonic significance of the Apollo 11 moon landing. Our mission today, if we choose to accept it, is to go where no Freemason has ever gone before. I know, but I couldn't resist. Our objective is to demonstrate the application of Masonic astronomy, astrology, and sacred geology, and to determine how other historical events may have used these sciences, and how we might continue to use them in the future. Upon doing my research for this particular topic, I actually saw that there was many synchronicities and coincidences between us and the actual Freemasons, and as well as a link back to ancient Egypt. And when we go back, we also see that it possibly can link up to our Masonic science of astronomy. The gentleman that you see before you is he is an Egyptian-American astronomic engineer, but for the sake of this particular topic, we are more interested in his Egyptian metaphysical background. He is an Egyptian-American space scientist and a geologist. He was an advisor to Anwar Sadat, the president of Egypt. He also pioneered research in Egypt, Somalia, the Sudan, and his father was also learned in the Egyptian sciences. Here you see only some of his awards, but he had 50 other awards based upon these particular sciences. Now, we're going to be going through some concepts that come from the Emerald Tablet. Now, the Emerald Tablet actually was known for the Freemasons of the 18th century. The key concepts in the Emerald Tablet is as above, so below, and so within, so without. Jesus actually said this when he said, if there's order in heaven, then there would be order on earth. The Emerald Tablet suggests that everything comes from one source, and there's 7 alchemical steps or 7 principles of the universe also located within the tablet. Orion's belt was actually in configuration when the Great Pyramids were built. And the Orion's belt was also aligned to Sirius. Now, Sirius is known as the dog star. Also, it is known as the star of Anubis. If you know Egyptian lore, what we know is that Anubis was actually the god who actually welcomed the deceased soul into the afterworld or the afterlife. Now, when the Pharaoh was living among the people, he was actually considered an incarnation of Heru. So it was actually a walking, living presence of Heru. But when the Pharaoh died, they said that he actually returned back to Orion's belt, which means that he went from being Heru to becoming Osiris again. So Orion's belt actually functioned as a portal that returned the living soul back to its source. Egypt was often called the mirror of heaven. And the reason why it was called the mirror of heaven, because every pyramid was aligned to some type of constellation in the sky. Ultimately, they were aligning the earth with heaven, and this concept might have been practiced by Freemasons. The question becomes, why was President Kennedy in such a rush to give the mandate to race to the moon on May 25th, 1961? And could he have pushed for this date because it might have lined up with Orion's belt? Conspiracy theorists often conclude that the real mission was to open up a portal to the deity Osiris. This may seem absurd until you see the alignments with Orion's belt and the alignments with Sirius. What you're looking at is a diagram of the Tree of Life. In the Tree of Life, actually, you have what we call Sephiroth. So what you're seeing here, you're seeing 10 circles. Each one of these circles actually have a correspondence to a particular planetary energy. So at the top, you see where it says Keter. This is actually the crown. And this is where God first reveals himself, or the universe first reveals itself. Then when we move to the right, we actually see this is where the zodiac signs are formed. Here is where Saturn is formed, where Saturn corresponds. This is Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, the Moon, and actually the Earth. Now, what you also see are these particular lines that lead to the different circles. There are actually 22 of these lines, and these lines are actually corresponding to the 22 Hebrew alphabets. So these lines actually open different portals as you would travel to the different Sephiroth. Now, something else that's interesting about this is that you actually have 10 different the 10 different serials, but you also have 4 different worlds that you would travel. So ultimately what would happen is you would actually move from the bottom Sephiroth, which is Earth, and then as you travel up to this Sephiroth, what you would have is you would have this triangle relationship between the planets, and this is what we would say would be the terrestrial triangle, or the triangle of Earth. As we move up to Tifereth, what you would actually see is you'll see another triangle relationship. And this is what we would call the mental triangle. So, and as you move further up the tree, what you would see is you'll see a triangle and a relationship between the spiritual forces, and this is what we would call the spiritual triangle. So let's look at our Masonic lore and use this as an example. If you would look at these 3 triangles, what you would actually see is that King Solomon had a dream, and as he had this dream, this dream took place in the spiritual realm. So once he had that dream, he actually hired his architects, and the architects was in this particular world, which is the world of mind. So in this world, what would actually happen is after King Solomon had his dream, you had an architect who would actually draw up the plans. After the architect would draw up the plans, then what you would have, it would move to this world, which is the terrestrial world. And what would actually happen is this is where you would have the builders who would come together, and if everyone was disciplined and everything came out well, then what would actually happen, you would have a manifestation which would actually come from this particular Sephiroth into the earth. Now this particular Sephiroth here is actually connected by this particular 32nd path. And this is known as the spiritual womb of the universe. When we look at the right hand collection of Sephiroth, this is what we would call as Masons the column of Jaqen. On the left-hand side, we would have what we would know as the Boaz. So what you actually have here is a correspondence of divine masculine and divine feminine. And you actually see as the progression of the soul as it moves up the tree of life. Now, we as Freemasons, what we also know is that we have 3 degrees. So within the 3 degrees, we know that in the apprentice, we have our feet affixed a certain way. Then the fellowship, in the fellowcraft degree, we have our feet fixed another way. And then at the top, we actually have it another way. So I want to show you how that works on the tree of life. So in the fellowcraft, you actually step here and the foot will be pointing here. I mean, in the apprentice, I'm sorry. In the fellowcraft, you would actually step here and the foot would be pointing here. And then when you get to the top, what you would actually have, you have both feet within the spiritual realm. This is also demonstrated in the Holy Royal Arch degree when you see the 3 Masons who are actually, they have their feet designed on the earthly realm, and you have the hands that are situated both for the mental realm and then also for the spiritual realm. Now here what you see an Egyptian Mason standing by a current Mason. You notice that you see the apron, which is a triangular shape, and then you see this particular ladder which leads from earth to heaven. Now you see the same concept with the modern Mason, except for you see the triangle turned down. Now here you see the same concept as it was in Egypt. When we talked about the Holy Royal Arch degree, which you actually see, you see the feet as they're aligned. You actually see that that's the way that we as Holy Royal Arch Masons would do, but we would have 3 brethren as opposed to 2. And then you see the staffs, which are crossed. That would actually represent the mental realm. And of course, when there is a crucifixion, if you will, what happens is there's a resurrection, and the resurrection is actually of the actual brother of Hiram, as you will. And then of course, at the top, you actually have the sun. Now, what's also interesting about this is that there's protecting the portal. And the portal that they're protecting is what we would call the Ankh. And this is the divine masculine. And the hoop is actually the divine womb or the divine feminine. And then you have this line, which actually is the intersection of them both. And also what's interesting too is you see what we would call Jachin and also Boaz, which to the Egyptians would have been known as the pillars of Hermes. Now, when we look at this landing site of this mission, we see that 33 play a very significant role. The landing site and precise timing aligns with Orion's belt. And by the way, the landing time was 333. The launching pad in New Mexico was 33. The first shuttle mission landed on the runway 33. And exactly 33 minutes after the landing, Brother Aldrin was taking communion. Now, Dr. Baz developed the precise details of the launch and the landing. Apollo landed when 3 belt stars of Orion was on the horizon, exactly 33 minutes after landing. Now, it is suggested that the reason why the astronauts landed at that particular point on the moon was because it was the flattest surface. But according to theorists, you would see that this particular spot aligns precisely directly under Orion's belt. So according to the landing site, the specific date, latitude, longitude, and time, we can see how the launch window was created. There are many Masons that were associated with this particular mission. Not only were the astronauts Masons, but also Kenneth Kleinneck was a 33rd degree Mason, and he happened to be the manager of the Apollo program command and service modules. So if there was any possibility that there was an alternative mission, then we brothers as Freemasons, we've had an opportunity to do this. Now, the ritual of communion dates back beyond the Catholic Church to ancient Egypt. The act of communion was originally an offering to Osiris. It is claimed by those who subscribe to this conspiracy theories that the Freemasons hijacked the mission and that Brother Aldrin performed this ritual for this particular purpose, to open up a portal to Osiris. Now, what you're looking at is the original Trinity, and you actually see Osiris, you see Horus, and you actually see Isis. Now, there were many items left behind on the moon. There was a plaque, an American flag, and a flag of the 33rd degree of the southern jurisdiction, and there was an olive branch left. Now, this olive branch could be directly traced back to astrological symbolisms of the early Freemasons. But as you see their logo, you actually see the obvious symbolism. You see the eagle, and the shuttle's name was the eagle. And you see in its talons, you actually see the olive branch as they land on the moon. And of course, the obvious symbolism is that Buzz Aldrin, who was a Freemason, was actually delivering the symbol of peace to the moon. Now, the mission was broadcast in 33 countries. 135 countries handed these astronauts their nation's flag. There was even coins commemorating deceased cosmonauts. But out of all these items, the only item that seemed to make it to the moon was the Scottish Rite flag. Brother Aldrin was deputized by the Grand Lodge of Texas to declare the moon under its Masonic jurisdiction. Now, this makes perfect sense because the name of this lodge is Tranquility Lodge, and that is the location in which they landed. And also, the lodge number was 2000. And this particular number makes perfect sense because in their mind at that particular time, they felt that by the year 2000, we'd be traveling back and forth to the moon the same way we would go to the supermarket. So by the time a Brother Mason would actually get to the moon, he could actually go by the lodge of the moon, and he could actually be able to even have a service perhaps, or have a ritual perhaps. This is actually a picture of the Scottish Rite flag. In my opinion, he might have had two copies of that flag, because I think that with the concept of as above, below, he might have left a copy of the flag on the moon and he returned one back to the Grand Master of Texas. My brothers, we are also accused of hijacking the moon, or the moon rocks. Some believe that the rocks were replaced by fakes and the real ones were given to world dignitaries. It is interesting when you actually look at a New Age interview of how Brother Aldrin seen the view of the moon and space. What he actually said was that when mankind actually touched down on the moon, he says that in these new worlds, they would find masonry there also. I will be explaining the sequences of the mission as explained by a website called Masonic Astronomy and the Lunar Landing, July 20th, 1969. I would suggest that if you want further details, that you would actually go to this website. The important dates linked to Egyptian astronomy was May 25th, 1961, and July 20th, 1969. On May 25th, 1961, John F. Kennedy made his speech to Congress calling for the U.S. to put a man on the moon. Now remember that in ancient Egypt, that the fixed star Sirius was rising when the pyramids were built. Here you see that Virgo is very significant in Freemasonry. You'd actually see that this particular circle here is what we don't see when we usually see this particular picture. And also this band of astrology you do not see. Over her head, you actually see the symbol of Virgo. And you see the weeping virgin with Father Time, and you see the column, the broken column of Hiram Abiff. In her hand, she actually has barley in the one hand and a spray of acacia in the other. So once again, we have that interplay of divine masculine, divine feminine, and also the broken column, which is a child which has to be crucified, if you will, and resurrected into a spiritual being. Now, this is a sky map. Now, a sky map is actually a snapshot of how the sky would look if you actually would go outside of a particular event and actually look up into the sky. So this sky map is showing a mundane square of Luna rising and Sirius culminating on the afternoon of John F. Kennedy's speech to Congress. When we look closer, we see that Luna is in the constellation of Virgo. The moon will return back to this position many times during crucial points in the mission. Now, this what you see is what we call a biwheel. A biwheel is a natal chart. It shows how the planets were aligned, and every person in every event has a natal chart. If you know the day that you were born, if you know the time that you were born, and the hour that you were born, then what we can actually do is to produce this type of chart. So when NASA was born, actually what we see that there was a 72-degree aspect. And here you actually see a 72-degree aspect. Here what we're looking at, you see Mars, Uranus, the Sun, Saturn, and the Midheaven at certain points where the Pleiades were forming. So here you actually see Pluto. You see Uranus and Mars here together. And then you also see Saturn here. And this is the Midheaven. This is what the natal chart will look like when Apollo lifted off from the pad 39A. Now we see Orion's belt, and we actually see the Pleiades down at the bottom of the screen forming. Now the Pleiades are actually 7 different ladies who are formulated in the astrology sign of Taurus. So here you actually have that phenomenon again of the divine masculine with the divine feminine, and there's actually like a universal womb that's actually opening, so to speak, so that the manifestation will come through. And being that this manifestation is coming through Taurus, you actually have prosperity, you have success, and you have abundance. And here we see the relationship of the planets in the noon chart of NASA. Here you see an interaction in the 5th harmonic of the Sun, Mars, Saturn, Uranus, and Pluto as Apollo lifted off from pad 39A. And here you actually see those particular planets. Here we actually see the Pleiades forming over Cape Canaveral as Apollo 11 lifted off. So once again, if you was actually at Cape Canaveral and you went outside during the time of this event, this is what you would actually see. You would actually look up and you would see the Pleiades forming in that astrological chart of Taurus. Now, at the top of the screen in this natal chart, once again, you see the Pleiades or the Pleiades forming. Here you see the Pleiades forming during the inauguration of George Washington's being a president on April 30th, 1789. When he took office, the Pleiades were forming over New York City. Now here, another mundane square over Washington, D.C. was forming as the Columbia and the Eagle separated. Now Spica is the chief star of Virgo, and this particular constellation could only happen on July 20th in the current century. Before the separation of the spacecraft, a triple conjunction took place between the Moon, Jupiter, and Uranus. And here, down at the bottom of the screen, you actually see Jupiter, Moon, and Uranus. Now, also in this particular, you see what we call a conjunction. Now, a conjunction occurs when 2 or 3 planets are situated within an orb of 7 degrees. Conjunctions are found within the same sign or can be found in adjacent signs. The more planets involved in a conjunction, the greater the emphasis. When 2 planets are very close in proximity, their energies, combine and become almost indistinguishable. Here you're looking at a bi-wheel as the moon transit NASA, and it's also activating a primary quintile. So here's the moon, and it's interesting because as the moon shifts to be able to activate this particular quintile, you also see on this side, the sun is actually moving into this quintile. So in the next slide, you will actually see this occurring. So now you see the moon has moved and has activated this particular quintile, and you see that the sun has actually moved to activate this quintile. And here you actually see the 72-degree aspect between these particular planets. Now here you see Markab. Now Markab is the saddle star of the winged horse Pegasus. Now the reason why this is so significant is that you see where Markab is located, and the symbolism that's concerning us as Masons is actually this square and compass, so to speak. And this is a bi-wheel as Armstrong took his first step onto the moon. Now here what you see is the galactic center as it intersects the local meridian at Washington, D.C. as Freemason Armstrong steps off the Eagle. Now this bi-wheel shows Armstrong's footfall, was also a moon return of the 1961 Kennedy speech. This bi-wheel of Armstrong's first step and Kennedy's speech forms a Mondo square. A Mondo square is an aspect which takes the Earth's equator as a point of reference. So once again, even though it's in the sky, what you're actually seeing is you're seeing the Earth's equator as a stability for prosperity and abundance and success of this particular mission. Now, as the Eagle lifts off the moon's surface, it almost gives the appearance that the moon is also lifting off the surface of the horizon. At mission control at Houston, this is what you actually see. It is notable that the altitude of Jupiter and Uranus are rising at 19.5 degrees. As the eagle lifts off the moon's surface at Washington at noon, it is in a 72-degree aspect. The moon in Midhaven is in quintile at Washington, D.C. So here we see, that's the Midhaven. And then this is the 72-degree aspect. Now, when you take the former bi-wheel and you locate it to Giza, what you actually see is that it points to Mars. This may be a clue or a hint to the fact that if we were successful in the travel to the moon, that the next travel may be to Mars. My presentation only scratches the surface. We may ask, how could these applications be used in our undertakings as Freemasons? Or where are they being used perhaps in the present day industries? Maybe in the entertainment industry, or maybe even in architecture itself. I hope this presentation has broadened your horizons. There is a book list that you can be able to read if you want to go deeper into the Masonic astronomy. There are not that many books that are written on Masonic astronomy, but there are 3 very good books by a brother, David Overson. When he first started his research, he was not a Mason, but after he did his research, he actually became a Mason. So those books are The History of the Horoscope, The Secret Zodiacs of Washington, D.C., Was the City of Stars Planned by Masons, and also The Stellar Theology and Masonic Astronomy by Robert Hewitt Brown. Thank you. Thank you for visiting us. And I hope that for your holidays that you, as above, so below, that as the stars are prosperous, that you'll be prosperous in the new and upcoming year. For questions and answers, you can be able to use our Zoom's in meeting chat to write us a question. Our next presentation will be on Saturday, January 16th, 2021 at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time through 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.